Hey Jordan, finally getting around to responding to your video about why there is suffering. First of all, I asked you why there's evil. The fact that you chose a lesser synonymous word, like suffering, either tells me that you don't want to deal with the topic of evil or you don't believe in evil anymore. But let me give you a for instance here. You related suffering and you compared the African people that are starving, that are suffering of starvation, as the people that are suffering, and I agree they are. For me, someone that is raped and murdered, yes, they suffer during that act, but really they are a victim of evil. You know, the people you're talking about and the person I just illustrated are both suffering a tragedy, but one of them, in my opinion, actually suffered it at the hand of an evil act. So, again, how do you account for evil in this world? You know how I account for it. The fall led to a less than perfect world, that God actually created the world originally in a perfect state, and it has now fallen from that state for a temporary period of time in which one day a return of Christ will bring upon the perfect state of things again. You don't believe that anymore. I don't know if you still borrow parts of my narrative or the Christian narrative in your new narrative. It seems that you do for two reasons. Number one, the way this whole dialogue got started is I couldn't understand how you and John have rejected our faith but still tried to hang on to pieces of it, even pieces like who we follow, Jesus Christ. It seems now, when I watched your whole video, really the only part that offered an apologetic, and it's one that I agree with, is towards the very end after you read this long quote. You said that God must want us to have free will, and that's why there's suffering, because there has to be options. Well, I totally agree with you. That's part of the Christian narrative. We explain this by saying that God wants us to willfully use the free will to choose Him. Instead of being mindless, servant-like robots that have no choice but to be in His service and to love and adore Him, He gave us the free will to do so. And therefore, those that do choose to do that, He knows truly do love Him, because they weren't made to love Him, they chose to love Him. So, do you borrow this from the Christian narrative, or do you have another explanation of why there's free will? Because I don't understand, unless you have the same explanation, why this nature God of yours would even care to give us any kind of free will. Why not just make us like the animals? We are just other life forms on this planet. Why give us this higher intelligence? Why give us this freedom of choice? Why give us these intellects that allow us to view the observable universe and conclude from it? I realize by reading your channel that you're trying to keep your faith very simple, and in this box where you believe in God and anything beyond that you don't really care to get into, because that's when you start making mistakes. But so in that vein, if you can't answer this or don't want to answer this, that's fine. And forgive me for coming to this conclusion, but this is kind of another one of the reasons I started this dialogue, is I have concluded personally in some ways that you know everything about Christianity that you reject, and you have reasons why you've rejected it, but you don't really know too much about what you now believe. At least in this particular instance, you spent almost 11 minutes talking about an African people, and suffering, if you cut it in half, would still proportionally feel the same. And it was like, okay, and it wasn't until the very end that you kind of offered the free will apologetic, which made some sense to me. But I feel like you're not, and maybe it's because you're so new to the deist side of things, but I feel like you're very well versed in all your rejection of Christianity, but you're not so well versed in offering much in the way of explanations of your new worldview. So I don't know if you want to come back and clarify. I don't know if you're tired of the back and forth. But why is there evil in the world? Not suffering. but evil. Suffering comes with that. And let me clarify one more point, and I'll end the video. I get the part where you're talking about how if you cut it in half, cut half the suffering out and leave a portion of it, that we will adapt to that, and it will still seem like a ton of suffering. That's human nature. I get that part of your presentation, but the problem with that part of the presentation is I'm not asking why there's even a portion of evil. I'm asking why there's any. Why is this not a utopian, perfect society, and why do we, by your new belief systems, have free will? Thanks in advance for any reply that you offer.